So it shaped my whole career. And then luckily when I got to Hereford, Graham was a lot like that as well. You do your job, you work hard. Whereas that team, everybody did the job that they were supposed to do. The cohesion in that team was frightening. What he did for this football club, I've always said, outside of top level football, you can rank him with Alex Ferguson. So I got back to Hereford and it was just, just felt home, I felt relaxed, I felt like I was back where I should be. It was like, who's in charge? And it was almost like we had to decide whether we want Jamie in charge or Gary in charge. So I almost went round the players and did a tally. Who do you want to be manager? Who do you want to be manager?
Hello and welcome to the London Wolves podcast with me, KD, in the glorious surroundings of Edgar Street before our game of Southport today. As you can see, we are joined by a very, very special guest today, Hereford United and Hereford FC legend, Robert James Purdie. I'm also here with my co-host, Tom Gaff. Tom, Rob, how are you gentlemen doing?
Yeah, good, thanks. Good, thanks. Good start. No, yeah, really good, thanks. And I appreciate you asking me to come down as well. I've been looking forward to it because I know it's been a good couple of months since we managed to get together. But yeah, I've been looking forward to it.
It's a bit emotional having you here. You're the reason I fell in love with football.
Am I really?
Yeah.
See, like I said to you, my wife hates football. So she was like, you get to go away and talk for 2 hours about yourself today, which I don't get to do anymore. People don't remember me anymore. So it's nice to hear things like that.
Yeah, well, as I mentioned, obviously got Rob Purdie. Rob joined Hereford United on 4 separate occasions, and then again, obviously for Hereford FC. You've got clear love for the club and for the city that you would eventually become your permanent home. With over 450 appearances combined for both clubs, Rob represents a great in the famous lily white shirt. A 4-time promotion winner with the Whites and just the 1 relegation, which we can't blame you for entirely, but So anyway, let's crack on and delve in. What age did you start playing football? How did you get into it?
I can't remember not playing football. I mean, when I was a kid, it's different now. 5-year-olds are going out and doing skill training and futsal and everything. Whereas when I was a kid, it was like 11 years old, I think, was the first year that you'd actually go and play games as a team. And I played the year above myself. But from the age of 6, again, different time, I'd just say to my mum, I'm going around the back of the shops. And, as long as you're back before dark, back for your dinner and everything, I'd do it. So I'd just go play with my brother, who was 2 years older. So I was always chasing better, stronger, faster people. And yeah, I just never stopped. Football Italia was on my TV in my bedroom every single Saturday. I grew up watching Italian football. That's what I based my game on, and my long hair until I was 21. But yeah, I can't remember not playing football.
Who was the player you kind of looked up to then in Italy? The
first one was Baggio.
Was it?
So I love the night. So the first World Cup I can remember was 1990, which is obviously in Italy. But then from there it was Mancini, Giuseppe Signori. Nice. So the ball players, and then that went down to Francesco Totti was always the one player that I looked at, even when I was, 25, 26. He was the player that I still looked at, though just made things look effortless. Didn't really win much, not like one of the greats, if you know what I mean, but just the type of player that I always wanted to be. Because I fancy myself as a number 10, although I played everywhere. Number 10 was where I wanted to play, because I was a striker at Leicester. But yeah, so Football Italia had a massive impact on me.
You mentioned Leicester, so how did that come about then? How did you get into the Leicester Academy and stuff?
Literally, I played that year above as under 11s, and then they went to under 12s, and I could play in my year. And one of the dads of the under 11s knew a Leicester scout, said, just go and have a look at this lad who's dropped down a year. I played up front, I think I scored 6 in this game, and then literally Leicester asked me to come in, and they didn't even have an age group for me at that time. That's what I mean. It was different, it was like 12s to 16s and then youth team. So I was the first player really that Leicester brought in, and then they started to bring in other players, and I was the only one really who stayed from that first day all the way through to the youth team, played with so many different players. But that's how I got into Leicester, and then never really thought of anything really. It's just I got to go and play football 2 more times a week, down at a decent training ground, and then started to go and watch Leicester and stuff. So that's how I got into it really.
Yeah, and Leicester, the team you supported?
I liked Man United when I was a kid. Literally because the first thing I can ever remember is seeing Man United playing a European Cup game Clayton Blackmore, for some reason, he scored a free kick, and it was like, he was my favourite player from there until I started to get into it. But yeah, so United, I used to go and watch Leicester, so I've got a good affiliation with Leicester. Always wanted Leicester to do well. Went to their like promotions at Wembley and stuff like that. But always probably a bit of a United fan because I was a kid and they won more. You know, that's how kids works for kids, isn't it? When you're a little kid sometimes.
Yeah. And so you mentioned obviously being in that Leicester Academy growing up. How did that shape you as a player? What impact did the coaches at that time have on you?
So I've always played as in, I'll do my job as well as I can do it. Forget about what's going on around me. I'll try and help other people and this and that. But I want to come off the pitch and say, I've done as well as I could there. I've done what the manager's asked me, and hopefully I've got enough ability to be good as well, if you know what I mean. And our youth team director that always oversaw us was a guy called David Nish. Now, David Nish, I don't know whether he still is, but he was the youngest ever captain at Wembley. I think he captained Leicester at Wembley at 17 or something like that. But he, very lot like Graham Turner, he was harsh. You couldn't be friends with him. He wasn't nice or anything like that. And you knew when he was disappointed in you. And it just made me not want to disappoint him. And that was the same with John Rudkin, who was another one of the team managers, had a big impact on me. He's now, I think, director of Leicester or something like that. I see him in the stands and on the TV and everything. But yeah, it was just that general, you work hard, you do things right, and if you've got enough ability, you will succeed. You know, it wasn't a case of, if you don't play very well but you score, that's good enough. That's not good enough. Let's try and play well and then use that ability. So it shaped my whole career. And then luckily when I got to Hereford, Graham was a lot like that as well. You do your job, you work hard. So it kind of like, I came to the right club from Leicester, if you know what I mean.
Yeah. Were you like close to the first team at any point? Like what was the situation there? Were you kind of knocking on the doors?
Yeah, it was. So Dave Bassett was manager, Mickey Adams was assistant, and the youth team managers wanted me to get a pro and stay for another couple of years. They loved me, the youth team managers. And then Christmas, Boxing Day, I was in the first team squad. There was 3 of the youth teamers that got put in the first team squad. Didn't get on the bench or anything like that, but we were there in and around the first team, trained with the first team a few times, playing in the reserve, scored a couple of goals. And Mickey Adams then wanted me to get a contract, but Dave Bassett looked at me. I think it was because I was too small, which I get. Dave Bassett was about 6'3", you know, got Jerry Taggart, Matt Elliott in the team and people like that, you know. He's a little old lad who wants to do flicks and tricks and stuff like that. So I think if I was 6'2", I think I'd have got a chance. Like a lot of my mates in my year actually played because Dave Bassett said, I just want your biggest, fittest, fastest players. And a couple of them went on to have a half-decent career. So yeah, there was a bit of to and fro about whether I was going to get it, and then I got told I wasn't. Then I got told, wait a minute, you are going to get a contract, and then again, it wasn't. So there's a bit of messing around, but that's just football, you know, you never right know. And then, so then it was time to find another club, which, you know, is always hard to be told as a kid, you're not quite good enough. But yeah, then it was go and find another club.
So talking of other clubs, come to the greatest club in the world. You know, Hereford United, there was a quote online saying, I didn't start that many games in my first season. I was mainly used as a sub. I remember scoring at Northwich Victoria. I was just glad to be playing. I was working hard. I was still quite small, you know, you mentioned that. The league was full of giants. Our own Ian Wright was nicknamed Yogi. There was Ian Hendon at Barnet, Gary Brabin at Southport, who were huge. I would go to Birmingham on my days off and do weight training with Tony Ford.
Yeah.
Now, how did it all come about? How did you come to Hereford? What was...
Do you know what? I remember it. It's mad, isn't it, how you remember certain things. But I was walking down the corridor. It was a Tuesday morning at Beaver Drive where we trained with Leicester. Alan Hill was my academy director. And he grabbed me, held me by the shoulders, and he said, you're going to go and play a game tonight. You'll never have heard of him. You won't have a clue where it is. And he said, but he looked at me and said, but you're going. And he was friends with Ron Dukes, who was a scout here for Graham. So I was like, okay. So I got my A to Z out, got my actual map out. My dad had to like kind of show me where I was going and what to look. I had a list of things that I had to look out for to get to Hereford. I had no idea. Like I said, you know, Leicester were in the Prem, and you get in that Prem bubble. So, you know, at that time, I had no idea who was even in the Championship. You know, I knew teams that were in the Premier League and that used to be in the Premier League. So I came down, we had a friendly against Burton Albion it was, Nigel Clough played because he was their manager at the time. And he played centre mid against me. And I can remember literally stood in line here. I'd tried to do him with the eyes 3 times. So I'd looked there and then whipped it past him to the striker. Did it twice. And I remember literally where I was stood. Did it again. And as I looked up, he'd read me. He'd stood there and it hit him, came back to me. And he looked, we made eye contact. And he looked at me as if to say, I've got you now, mate. I can't do that anymore. Because I remember almost smiling. I think we beat them 3 or 4-0. But I just came down for that game and then that was it. I went away to York for a week. I went somewhere else for a game. And then Graham met me on the M5 in the summer and offered me a contract, which I turned down. I wanted to try and stay in the league. York wanted me to go back and Lincoln had rang me as well. Keith Alexander had rang me at Lincoln and said a United scout told him to have a look at me. So went to Lincoln for a week in pre-season. Keith Alexander, he really liked me, but he was like, mate, I like big players. Yeah. He was like, he was 6'3". I remember playing in one of the pre-season games, and Peter Gain, his name was, who had a decent career at Lincoln. He played one into me, and as I've got it, I've flicked it back to him and spun. And then as I've turned round, he's not got it. And he went, mate, we don't do that here. He was like, we don't do that. Just pass it back. You know what I mean? So nothing happened there. I spoke to York and they had money troubles. They weren't looking at things. And then as it happened, I literally went back to Leicester in pre-season just to say hello to my mates, speak to John Rudkin, my old manager and everything. And Alan Hill said, do you want me to give Hereford a ring? Do you want me to give Ron Dukes a ring again? So I was like, yeah, if you can. And then Graham Turner rang me the next day and was like, yeah, contract offer's still there. So Ron or Graham must have seen something in me because, Graham's not the type of person to turn down and ring back 2 months later and say, I've got nowhere, can you take me? But he said, contract offer's still there, same contract, come down. We had about a week left till the end of the season. So I was a week away from retiring. That would have been me done, you know. I might have been able to go to an Oby Town or a Loughborough or someone like that in Leicester, but I was a week away really of being clubless and no club. So I came here, and start first season. I think I only started 11 games first season. Young kid coming on, getting used to it. Like I said, big players going to 40 on a thing, doing high pulls, push press, like in this little dungeon 40. It was no bigger than this, rusty weights and everything. But he did half. I mean, I was 10 stone 10. Got up to like 11 and a half. And then, that first season was just me kind of embedding myself in first team football. And then end of the season, I was like, might get a contract, might not get a contract. I probably played in most games, 80, 90% of the games, but as I say, 11 starts. And I think Graham gave me that contract for the second season just to say, well, if you can build on this, you might be useful. I don't think it was like, I need you, but it was like, you've done well. I see something in you, and if you grow on that, then I think you'll be all right. So it was almost like, I'll give you one more year and we'll see how it goes. So then we got into the second season. Yeah.
What did you think of Edgar Street when you first came to it, and certainly in those league games? What was the crowd like? How did that differ to what you'd...
I don't remember much of the first season, to be honest. I was 19, turning 20. I'd left Leicester. My girlfriend was going to university at Nottingham. Kind of like was trying to really get that playing men's football, mixing with older people, and then getting home and stuff like that. So I don't remember much. I remember the goal against Northwich Victoria. I remember that. I think that's about the only thing I can remember from that first game. I remember the Doncaster chairman coming on actually on the last game of the season. He registered himself and came on against it because we were spewing. We were so angry about it, and then he came in the club afterwards and gave us 250 quid for our night out. Okay, no problem, mate. No problem. I hope you enjoyed it. So I don't remember much about it. The thing I can remember, my first thought of that second season was we beat Farnborough at home 2-1. Pitts scored 2, I think, and I set up the second one. I started, and Pitts came on and he scored the second goal. Got to the byline, crossed it in, and he flicked it in near post. Meadow end. I just remember the roar of the Meadow end. That's the first thing I can really tie down as like my first big memory of that, if you know what I mean. But that first season, I can't really remember it much.
Can I ask you about the M5 meetup with Graham Turner? Now, what is that like? Like, are you meeting in a Costa or something? Like,
No, I think it's Junction 11A. It was a hotel. It was a Premier Inn, and he met every player there. Every single player he signed, he met there, and every player he signed, we found out 2-3 years over the course of the first 2-3 years. He met there because he didn't want anyone to know how far away Hereford is. Yeah. And every player had the same thing. They say, he said it was only 20 minutes away from here. Because like on a map it's like 30 miles or something like that. But it's an hour for the last 15, 16 miles. But yeah, that's why. So I think I met him there with my dad when I first rejected the contract. And I'm not sure whether I met him there another time as well, maybe for another contract negotiation throughout the years. But yeah, that was why. He met everyone there, and he said Hereford's about 20 minutes down.
Yeah.
Because he knew that people would turn away if they knew it was an hour away from Birmingham.
Yeah. You know, as you said, second season, pretty big one. You know, I think you played up front with Steve Guinan for a bit. You had the battle with Leicester City, missed out on top spot by 1 point. You know, you played Aldershot in the playoffs, lost some penalties, huge results, 7-1 v Halifax, 7-1 v Forest Green, the 1-1 draw with Exeter on TV. I think you scored that. Yeah. You scored on that game actually, and 9-0 against Dagenham. Now, what was happening in that team? Why was it so good?
So I think the start of the season, again, I was just a sub. I was going to be a sub, and we signed David Brown. And Brownie, I don't know whether he broke his collarbone or dislocated his shoulder in pre-season. And we were a bit short of people, and so I played up front for a bit of pre-season. We had Wolves here, and I scored against Wolves, lobbed Matt Murray. Good finish, but I think he just saw me as, well, I've got Gins, I've got Paul Parry, I've got Ben Smith, Jamie Pitman, I've got Danny Williams. I was just a runner, literally just a dog. They nicknamed me the dog because I just ran after the ball. So that's why I started that season. And me and Gins just worked. You know, that season, so we look at like Hereford FC, and you know, I'd played a good team in Darlington as well. But that is the best team I played in. And the reason why it's the best team, one, everybody had a footballing brain. You know, Greeny, Tretz, Tony James, Michael Rose, Matt Baker in goal on that. But two as well, everybody could do their job. Like with Hereford FC, you know, we had Millsy, who sometimes is a bit lazy or hungover. And then we've got Moose, who had all the ability, but sometimes he'd just want to do his own thing. He'd want to be the show pony type thing. Whereas that team, everybody did the job that they were supposed to do. The cohesion in that team was frightening. And obviously we had some real bad results. You know, we drew, I think, at Lee RMI away, which is the type of game which stopped us getting promoted, if you know what I mean, when you look at that points thing. But those games, I remember the Halifax game here, we went 1-0 down. It was an early goal for Halifax. And I remember us all kind of like, they were celebrating, almost like, you know, you've got, because I think we played on about 6 games into that 11-game winning streak. And I remember us laughing. I remember me looking at Tretz and laughing, because we were kind of laughing as in like, they actually think they're going to win. We were that confident, do you know what I mean? The Dagenham away, I mean, we got battered in the first 10 minutes at Dagenham. We couldn't get our half, and then Greeny got a penalty, didn't he? Which J-Mo scored. And that game, and that again, we went in the change rooms afterwards, and we sat down, and no one said a word. And we just kind of like laughed as in like, what's just gone on? What's just gone on? How has that happened? You know, because Dagenham were 5th in the league, something like that, 6th in the league. It was like a real, one of those could have gone on to try and push Chester. But it was just the best team of footballing brains that just worked. And obviously those last 11 games, I think the 13th game towards the end of the season, we went 3-5-2. And Smudger went behind me and Gins, Ben Smith. Ben was such a good player, Ben. God, what a player. Yeah. And then Ben dislocated his shoulder that game. Then we went to Gravesend and I think lost 3-2, something like that. And then Graham put me in the hold. Brought David Brown and Mark Beasley up front to partner with Gins, and then put me in that hold. And I think he put Rosie into centre mid as well, Michael Rose with Pitts, and Rosie could play between the lines. And I said to you, Totti, Mancini, Signori, that was my role. When I look back at my career, I always think that I was too unselfish. I should have said, I mean, I played in a realm of 4-4-2. No one played 4-4-1-1. No one played 3-5-2. No one played 4-3-3. It was 4-4-2. So I'm not quite a centre mid. I'm not a striker. But I played in that hole, and I just loved it, absolutely loved it. And the most frustrating thing for me on that season was obviously we went to Aldershot and I got injured against Aldershot. I didn't play in the second leg. I went for a shot, a lad blocked it, it just bent my foot back. I played on, not sure whether I came off with about 10 minutes to go, something like that. And then I remember waking up the next day and I couldn't move my foot. And that even went into next season. I struggled the first few games of the next season because it was that bad an injury. And I remember watching it here and the penalties and obviously Tret's getting sent off. And I'd played for England C that season with Aaron McLean, Roscoe Desane, who played for Aldershot. And it's a real shame because I think we'd have kept Ben Smith, Michael Rhodes, because they only went to other League Two clubs. And yeah, it's a shame that season didn't quite pan out because that group of players was so good, it was frightening.
Yeah.
And like I say, it's how we worked with each other.
Yeah, it's interesting. You talk about the cohesion, but it was very much sort of a patchwork team in terms of players coming from different places and not knowing each other. And you mentioned before about being young players as well. Yeah, how did it work? Why did it work?
So, and this has spanned throughout my whole career with Hereford. Everybody bought into Hereford, and that's the difference for me personally. So I think probably 90% of the team lived in Hereford.
Yeah.
Ben Smith, Matt Baker, Rosie, J-Mo, myself, Pitt, Paul Parry. We lived in Hereford, Danny Williams, John Grant, everybody, apart from potentially like Gins and a couple of, I think like Jordan King and Rich Teasdale, they lived Birmingham way. And we'd go out in Hereford, we'd see the fans, we would be walking around town. And that bred success throughout my first 5 years, because then Craig Stanley, Andy Farrell, Wayne Brown, Dean Beckworth, we all stayed in Hereford. And then whenever I've not had success in Hereford, the players don't buy into Hereford. They've come here to get their money and then they're going home, they're back on the motorway, or we'll draw a game or lose a game, but they're still going to go out and get drunk because they don't care about the city and about the fans and stuff like that. Those 5 years, everybody who came to this football club cared about the city and wanted Hereford to do well. And anyone who didn't was out the door. Whereas, we'll get onto it, but Martin Foyle's reign, Jamie Pitman's reign, Sean Cannon, Yanis Kovacs, people like that, there's 1,500 quid a week. Oh yeah, brilliant. Yeah. And then, okay, so I've got that for 2 years, and then where am I going to get my next £1,500 a week from? Whereas Hereford, it was, we bought into Hereford, and that's the big difference. Big difference.
Yeah, I mean, you're right, there was a big culture, certainly in terms of going out. I mean, I remember I'm not quite old enough to have gone out with at the same time as you guys, but my brother-in-law and sister were there at the time, and they've got lots of photos of Dean Beckworth and those types of players where they were going out. You probably, and so no, I think you're right. That may be, going off topic, is why it's not necessarily working so well at the moment, because you've got players from everywhere, and not that they don't buy into Hereford. I think they have this season. That's probably the big difference with what we're doing, but it would help maybe.
Definitely.
Training.
Or even just like, because I know Paul Caddis has done well, and we are getting off topic here, but I know Paul Caddis has done well in trying to get them to come down and go to little events and stuff like that. But even under BGC, every game, everybody had to go in and see the fans. Got to go in and see the fans. There is no, I've got to get off. No. Everybody gets changed and goes in. And then you had people like Joe Tomelty, who obviously lived around. You had Dylan Bonella, myself. And then people like Millsy, Pabs, Birchie, Simo, they'd want to stay and go out for a meal and stuff like that, Jimmy Oates and everything. So they bought into it, if you know what I mean. And that's down to Graham Turner, and it was down to Beads. Not particularly the players, but you've got to make the players want that. Whereas some people come in over the last couple of years, I know we've signed a couple of strikers, £700-800 a week. They're probably last in, and then as soon as the game's over, shower, off they go. They don't care. They might stand there and kiss the badge, or they might tap the badge and stuff, but they don't care. You can tell. I get wound up by it. I can tell, you know what I mean? Whereas we had players that cared about Hereford, and that was a big thing.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So obviously, we should probably go back to it, because that's my fault we went off topic there. So we finished second 3 years in a row with losing to Stevenage in the playoffs that second year. And then obviously we beat Morecambe in that third year to finally get through to the final. What was the difference in that third year that maybe got us through? And what was it like finally getting through?
I think the Stevenage one, I think that's from those first 5 years that I was at Hereford. I can't really remember that first one, but those 3 years where we came second, the middle season where we lost Stevenage, that was the worst team out of the three,
Right.
Definitely. We weren't quite as good. It's a hell of a thing to finish second 3 times in a row, though. You know, that in itself is a big achievement with such a turnover of players that we did. But that last season, we had the big Guy Pua, you know what I mean, the big father figure Guy, who is a strange entity, Guy. He was the worst player, one of the worst players that you could play with, in the fact that you had strongest man in the world, right? Every day after training, he'd just go in the gym. We're all, Greeny's there doing his chest and biceps with his fake tan, and you know we're trying to look good in our t-shirts next to Greeny and that. And Guy would just come in, he'd pick up a big plate and he'd just stand there and do this. That's literally all he'd do. 10 minutes, right? But then on a game on Saturday, he'd stand there and the defender would try and come around him and he just could do that. And they couldn't get around him because he was so strong. You never knew what he was going to do when he got the ball going. Because he'd trap it and then he'd want to take 2 players on, you know. But that mentality again, which I don't think we had in that second year. Second year we had Lee Mills, we had Graham Hyde, we had Stacey Caldicott, players again who kind of like, Millsy's got 17 houses paid for that he rents out, and Heidi's had a Premier League career. Do they really care that much? Not saying that they didn't, because they got good standards, because that's how they got where they were. But they just weren't quite the right people that we needed there. And then second year, we obviously had Guy. Alex Janine came into his for a little bit. Fez and Dean Beckworth and people like that had kind of like ingratiated themselves in the city, so they probably had a bit more impetus now. They were starting to want Hereford to do really well, and we were just a little bit more together. I mean, obviously Morecambe, that could have gone either way, you know, at their place I think it was 1-1.
That was the game that made me fall in love with football.
Was it?
It was a sliding doors moment. I was on Sky Sports,
Yeah.
and I flicked onto Sky Sports 2, and I saw you about to take the penalty.
Yeah, really?
Got hooked ever since.
Really?
So it's a bit of a mad moment.
Amazing, yeah. Yeah. Amazing. But yeah, so I got the penalty, and it was 1-1, and then obviously came back here, and it was a 2-4 game here. Obviously, you know, I think I set up Tam for the first goal. I think Tam scored a header from a corner. I think that was the first goal, and then they scored 10 seconds from kickoff. The player passed it in between Frenchie and Dean Beckworth. Alex gave away a free penalty. They score, then we go up again, and they get back, and then obviously Guy comes on, runs through, top bag, runs over, you know. And we had games as well at Exeter that season where Guy got sent off after Alex scored the winner and stuff. But what I will say about Guy is he just gave us that a bit of an aura again, if you know what I mean.
Yeah.
We lost that in that second season, but the aura we had from the first season with Gins and Ben Smith, because you know that season we lost Gins, Ben Smith, Michael Rose, and Matt Baker. There's your spine, totally gone. Your spine's gone. Whereas Guy gave us that focal point. Didn't play every game, but he gave us that focal point. And then obviously it could have gone either way in the final as well. You know, 3-2 again. Extra time again and stuff like that, because I think it was extra time when Guy scored the winner against Morecambe, and then Guy comes on again and gets the headlines, and you see him telling and scaring the hell out of Andy Williams to get off the pitch. Poor Willow, like 19 years old, being screamed at to get off so we could come on. But I think it was that we had a little bit more of that aura and that never say die that we didn't quite have against Stevenage. Stevenage bullied us out of it in the semi-finals. They really did. And we had that bit more steel about us in that last season in the conference.
We can do a bit of memory corner on the final, actually, because obviously that must have meant a lot to you going back to your hometown.
Yeah,
you know?
yeah.
It's not called the King Power anymore, but the Walkers. But
yeah,
what was it like for you personally going back there and winning?
Yeah, because I'd never been there. So I left, I think, when I left Leicester, I'm not sure whether it was the last season at Filbert Street or the next one was the last season at Filbert Street. So I went back, and there was a couple of people there from Leicester, who, like John Rudkin, I think, was there and stuff. Obviously, my family were there and everything. So it was like almost, with Wembley being out of action, it was the perfect setting for me to go back to. I hated the game because I played terribly in it. We talk about standards. I really struggled afterwards because I was so disappointed in my own performance, which I wish I didn't have that in me. Do you know what I mean? But I did. So I was disappointed after the game in my own performance. I got the 2 front teeth knocked out by Peter Atherton, big centre half, because I tried to be clever, and I knew he was going to win the header. But I thought I'll leave one on him and he left his elbow out. 2 front teeth literally went horizontal. They're false, and I'd just had them done as well, and they literally went horizontal. And I thought, because I looked, I thought, oh, there's no blood, and then I put my tongue up, and they were both literally horizontal in the back of it. So I put my thumbs up behind them and pulled them back into place, and then it just started bleeding. Yeah. So I had to play the whole game with teeth because they were literally hanging out, and I thought, I've just paid for these. And then obviously Tam goes coast to coast. That's what I say to Tam. He picked the ball up like mid-hour off and just went on a mad run, played it out, I think, for, and it was Stanners or Willow, and then they crossed it in for Willow or Stanners, one of them did. I think it was Stanners crossed it in for Willow. Because they scored their goal when I was off changing my shirt the first time. And then I had to change the shirt at half time again, I think at the end time, because I just couldn't stop the bleeding. And then obviously Guy comes on, scores his header, and then Greeny puts in the cross that goes in the back post, and then tries to spear someone in the crowd with the thing, gets his top off. I knew he was going to get his top off. We'll talk about the Morpeth game later, but I knew Greeny was going to get his top off, and he was dying to score against Morpeth as well, so we could take his top off. But yeah, just a real I think because I've been there twice and lost as well, it was kind of that finally, and I know it meant so much to Graham, because Graham, I don't know whether it was second season or third season, and I might be wrong with this, but for our understanding was Graham was on his way to go to Shrewsbury halfway through the season. He was in the car, he wasn't at training, he was in the car, he was going to be manager for Shrewsbury. Yeah. Shrewsbury had gone into League Two. And he turned round, he thought, no, I can't do it, I have to see it out with Hereford. And then obviously so he stayed, and we got into League Two, which was a massive thing for him, because I think he put a lot of effort into this. I think we've found with a lot of chairmen, they always close the doors a little bit to the fans and say, this is my club now. We've seen it with Hereford FC, we saw it with David Keat. They get into a point where when it's not going quite right and people start attacking, they just go, no, I'm not talking to you anymore. I know what I'm doing, don't care about your opinion. Graham didn't do that, but he did shut himself away from the fans a bit, and he put a lot into this. So I think he did lose some fans in that way. But what he did for this football club, I've always said, outside of top level football, you can rank him with Alex Ferguson as not up there, but for what he did for this club, I think it's very similar to the type of thing Alex Ferguson did for the thing, and so he deserved it as well. But yeah, it was great. We a good night out afterwards.
What was he like before the game? What did he say as the team talk? Was it like a Winston Churchill kind of speech? What did he kind of say to you?
So Graham was really quiet, Graham.
Really?
Yeah, he would always be in the office. He'd come out to train and he'd jog around the pitch for about 40 minutes whilst we're doing our warm and everything, because he had to warm up his knee. He's got a real bad knee. And then he'd come in, man a few words, but everything he said either put the fear of death into you or made you want to play for him. And he's gone off on him after the game, flipping heck, he could go off on people. Yeah. Jesus, I remember him punching through a tactics board once, and blood, oh God, he went mental. And video nasties on a Sunday, lose on a Saturday, you're in here, and he had his video cassette, and he had a slow-mo button, but it was the slowest thing ever, right? And I remember we had a game, and Tam, this was in the league, I think, Tam had someone had gone to have a shot, and Tam had gone for it, and he cut inside and scored, and Tam had gone a good 7 or 8 yards afterwards. And me and Danny K. Bircham were saying, Tam, you know what's coming, mate. And he was yeah. And he's got it, and you could just see Tam, and the slow motion, and it took about 30 seconds for Tam to go this 10 yards, and we're just nudging Tam, and he's trying not to laugh because he knows Graham's going to go mad at him. But so he could blow, Graham could absolutely blow. And that's the thing where I feel like I got quite close to Graham. I class him as a friend, but he was very hard to get to that. I was the only person who dare come into his office to ask for something from the players, the only one. Everyone else was too scared for him. We used to get paid by cheque, every Tuesday, cheque. And if you didn't get it in on Tuesday afternoon, it wouldn't clear for Friday, so you didn't have your money for the weekend. If we lost on Saturday, checks weren't ready. Checks weren't ready. So you'd have to wait till Thursday. So every Tuesday, when we know we're not going to get our checks, it would be, Purdy, go on, mate, you've got to go and get your check. Go and get your checks. Then I'd literally come in. Obviously, it looks different now, but I'd knock on the door, come in, open the door. Checks aren't ready. Okay, thanks, Graham. Close the door and walk off. There was no bartering with him. I remember that second season against Chester. I went in for my contract negotiation because I signed, I think, before the Chester games. We played Chester last game of the season, didn't we? And beat them. And he looked at me and he offered me £210 a week. It was £210 a week. And I was only on £115 a week, I think. No, sorry, I tell a lie. It was after the first season. He offered me £115 a week, £5 a week rise, right? And I was like, oh, well, I think I've done quite well, Graham, and, you know, I think I've got more to give. And, you know, and he went, £115, take it or leave it. And I was like, okay, I'll take it. There was no bartering with him at all, do you know what I mean? But I knew as soon as he said that, I was like, okay, yeah, I'm getting nothing more out of him. The 210, I could have got him on that. I didn't realise that season, because I'd done so well, I think there were other clubs sniffing around me. Never had an agent. I only had an agent maybe 2 seasons in my life, so I didn't really know about it. And I think that's why he tied me down before the last game, because he knew that I could then go for, not a free, but he'd only get a bit of compensation for me. But yeah, he's great, Graham. I could not speak highly enough of him.
Yeah. So obviously, played a final, great success. Finally, back into the Football League for Hereford after 9 years of being in the conference. Because obviously it was your first season really in men's football in the Football League as well. So, you know, how was that? How different did it feel? What was the standard like?
I didn't see much of a difference in standard. I think my game suited a better level until I get to a level where I am maybe a little bit too small and stuff. We go back to Leicester, you know, people saying, oh, well, that's just a cop-out. So I think, well, if you put me in centre mid against Patrick Vieira, I think he's going to have a field day on me. Do you know what I mean? He's quicker than me, he's better on the ball than me, and he's 6'3". I've got no chance. But week 2, I didn't really see that much difference week in, week out. I felt like I could handle it, felt like I could cope with it. It was nice to go into a few bigger teams and stuff like that. Obviously another half-decent turnover of players and stuff, and then we had people like Neil Mackenzie come in, I think, from Notts County, and we had obviously John Eustace come down from Stoke and stuff like that. So we got to play with a better quality, and that's where my game improves. You've got some players who you put them in a team at the bottom of the league, team at the top of the league, they'll give you the same. Mike McGrath is a big one of those who played for FFC. He'll run around, he'll tackle. Whereas I'm like, I need a Ben Smith or a Steve Guinan or a Simo or a Pabs or a Birchie. I need people like that around me, because I like to play intricate passing and to feet and 1-2s, and I put myself in danger. So if no one's looking for it, I'll get tackled. So it's my fault, it's my flaw as a player, but at the same time, I need players, the cleverer players around me, so that I can play my game. And so yeah, I really enjoyed it. We had a good season, but then we really tailed off at the end of the season. I don't think we won in like the last 7 or 8 or something like that, because we were fluttering where either a good 7 or 8 and we're going to get in the playoffs here, a bad 7 or 8, and I think we finished like, I don't know, 14th, 15th, something like that, wasn't it? We went to Torquay last game, and Graham Turner said to us, he literally said, team talk, talk about team talk before a big game. It wasn't a big game because, you know, we weren't going down, going up. But he said, read your contracts. Said in your contracts you'll have 2 weeks of holiday per year. If you lose today, you are in on Sunday and you can have 2 weeks off in the summer. That's it. And he meant it as well. He really meant it. I think we drew 1-1 or 0-0.
Really poor
It was terrible, wasn't it? The pitch was awful, real hard and bobbly. But I remember a corner.
It was a warm day, if I remember.
Yeah, I remember a corner. I looked at Tam and I was like, mate, don't concede. It was like towards the end. I was like, don't concede, because I knew Graham meant it. He might not have gone through with it, but at the time when he said it, he meant it. He meant it, because obviously, you know, you get 7-8 weeks off. He would have had 2 weeks. We would have had 2 weeks off. So yeah, it tailed off, but I enjoyed that season. And again, you know, just to go up, and we were good enough for top half. We were good enough for maybe 10th, 11th, something like that. And we did tail off and stuff. But again, that's another hell of a good thing to be able to do after coming out of the conference, and again having a bit of a changeover in personnel and stuff.
Yeah, no, I mean, staying up, I think, had to be the aim for that season. Obviously, you talked about with Turner being sort of quietish before games and maybe quite loud after games, depending on how you got on. But yeah, from the stands, he seemed like, say about Sir Alex, you know, he was quite a bit of a father figure to a lot of players, especially if they needed it. young lads far from home. You know, obviously that was our team. Really.
Yeah, he gave you respect. If you worked hard for him, he gave you respect. You know, and I think that's the way you've got to work with football. And you look at Alex Ferguson, if you worked hard for him and did it, you know, they obviously say the Man United way, but if you did that for Alex Ferguson, he looked after you, didn't he? You know, and that's why I kind of see the similarities between their managerial styles and their personalities and stuff like that. They will not take less than 100%. Mm-hmm. And if you won't give it, then you will find yourself, you know, you look at Beckham, Van Nistelrooy, people like that, you know, still in their prime, but well, you go then, you know, you're not doing it for me now, you've got flaws in yourself and everything, so go. So and that's what Graham did. You know, it was a real tough call leaving Hereford that first time. I was in Barcelona and I rang Graham and said that, look, I'm going to move on. I gave him my reasons and everything like that, and he was great. I was bricking it before I rang him. I remember I was in the new camp doing the tour of the new camp. And I was stood halfway up the stands and my heart was, God, it was beating because I didn't want to disappoint him. And he said, you know, he said to me, I wish I could offer you more money, because he knew what Darlington had offered me. He said, I wish I could offer you more money. And I said to him, look, although the money is better, I said, there are these reasons and these reasons why I want to move on as well. And he was great. He was really nice to me. I thought he was just going to put the phone down on me, but he wasn't. He was brilliant. And that obviously was nice for me because, as I say, I saw him as this like ultimate father figure, exactly what I want to see in football, Graham, which I still do now.
I wanted to talk about that actually. So that move to Darlington and Oldham. What was it like relocating like far away? How did you find that personally?
It was exciting in a way. I think so. When I spoke to Graham at the end of that season, I said I'd had a few boos from some of the fans. You know, I remember coming on, and I think it was an LDV game. I don't know whether it was against Shrewsbury, but I came on. Graham had given me a rest because I'd played a lot of the games, and I got booed coming on. I remember Ben Smith. I think he was playing for Shrewsbury at the time. Or he might have been on loan with him, I can't remember, but he looked at me and went, what's that all about? And I was like, I don't know, mate. And that did affect me because, again, you know, even if I'd had a bad season, I still tried. I'd always try. So even if I'm not playing very well, which I thought I'd had a decent season, but, you know, either or. And then as well, I said to Graham, I said, I think the problem with me is I know that I'm going to start the first game of the season for you. And he said, yeah. And I said, I kind of need a challenge. I kind of just need a fresh challenge because I don't want to go stale. And I knew as well that if I did go stale, then with a portion of the crowd getting onto me, then it's going to be a really tough season for me. So that's why I moved on. But I enjoyed my time. We had Dave Penny as manager. Dave Penny had liked me for a while, but wanted me to be free because I was 24 now, so I could go for a free. So he took me to Darlington, and we had a really good 2 years at Darlington. A really good team, really good team. Players that would get in my best 11 in a huge ground with no fans, which was really weird. I've gone from like a packed out, you know, tin roof, great noise, meadow end when you score, to playing left wing for Darlington, and there's no one within 20 metres of me. Do you know what I mean? It was real weird. And I didn't like that side. For some reason, the ball always went down the other side where some of the fans were. We used to get 3.5, I think, at Darlington. They're really good fans, a lot like Hereford. A small place, you know, Darlington, and they had big Newcastle, Sunderland, Middlesbrough all around them. So they really clubbed together. It was very similar in that effect to Hereford. And we came close. Obviously, Hereford picked us in the first season to promotion pretty much. Yeah. I think it was down at Darlington. I think Gary Hooper scored. It was 1-0, and again we were third and fourth all season, and then Hereford ended up pipping us into third, and then we lost in the playoffs to Rochdale on penalties, which I'm used to, so that was all right. Yeah. And then second season we went into administration with about 11 games to go, something like that. I think we lost like 4 on the bounce after it, 5 on the bounce.
Did it feel weird playing against Hereford, even though you...
Do you know what? So I hadn't realised that there was a bit of a hoorah about... Because when I went to Darlington, they had the brand new stadium, didn't they? And they interviewed me and stuff. And I was like... I think I said, and I meant no harm in it, and I'd say it now. I said, there's more people that work in reception that run Hereford. Because they had like 4 ladies and a bloke on reception. I thought, well, there's Graham, Joan, and that's pretty much it. Yeah. Lee Simmons, you know. So, you know, I said that, but I think that got taken really out of context here. Because Because when we came here and got absolutely pummeled 5-1, got battered, I was so excited to come back. So excited. And I thought, okay, I've got a couple of Purdie haters, but I've left in a good enough way. And I remember we were warming up here and my name came out and everybody booed. The whole stadium booed me. And I was like, wow, it really took me aback. I was like, oh wow, what's happened? And then because I was back in Hereford, people were telling me and everything. And then obviously, and then we got beat 5-1. We had an old boy left back, really good player, Tim Ryan, but you had Lionel Ainsworth. And he just tore honestly, Brownie would get the ball and just whack it into the channel, and Lionel would just tear past Tim Ryan. And then back at their place, Gary Hooper was there and Serge and that. So Tiamani Diagaga and stuff. So picked us 1-0. But I had a really good game up at Darlington. Again, got a couple of boos. I remember, I think I tried to back heel it to try and keep it in play from near our byline. I kicked it out for a corner and that got a few cheers from the But yeah, I really enjoyed it. So I didn't mind playing against them too much. And obviously they went up, we stayed down. And then when I went to Oldham, Hereford had got relegated. So we missed them in League One. But Oldham was, I never made a squad in Oldham. I had an operation, I had 3 operations in a year. And it ended quite sourly with my time at Oldham, to be fair.
Yeah. Obviously, then you came back on loan to Hereford. Obviously fitness, but somewhere... how did that come about? Was that a phone call from Turner or did you...
From Jamie, Graham McGon. Graham McGon. So Simon Davey had come in at the start. And so I hadn't played a first team game in about 17 months it had been. I played a few reserve games and my operation was a career ending operation, which I luckily got back from and I was feeling fit. As I say, it didn't work out with Oldham and I had a few disagreements with Paul Dickoff, the manager there and stuff, who was just trying to do his job, but anyway. And then Pitts rang me and he literally said, I need a left mid. Are you fit? So I was like, yeah, I'm fit. He said, right, well, I think they were having a training match or a little behind closed doors on, I think it was Thursday. So he said, well, come down on Thursday and I'll just make sure you're fit because I can't bring you down for a month and then you're not fit.
Can I ask though, like obviously you had booze and stuff. You were saying, like, was that in your head a bit? Like, oh, I got a bit of a bad reception. Were you feeling that a little bit?
Do you know why? Because I felt like I was coming back home.
Really?
Yeah. It was really weird. I felt, even though I'd got those boos, I felt like enough time had passed now because it was another 2 seasons, 2.5 seasons, I think maybe. I just wanted to come back to Hereford. As soon as Pitts rang me, I think I text Pitts because you try and manipulate the situation. I think I text Pitts like, mate. Good luck, blah, blah, blah. And then, a few days later, oh, mate. So I came down and I remember, and I've said this before, I remember getting on the Worcester Road, coming down and that roundabout at the bottom of Elston Hill, where you turn left to come up the first bit of Elston Hill. I just remember getting to that roundabout and it was almost like the weight lifted off my shoulders. I'd had 16 months, the worst part of my career, 3 operations. It was 12 months between training sessions. And then a week into pre-season, Paul Dickoff says, Purds, oh yeah, you're looking sharp. And then a week later, he's like, chairman's putting you on the transfer list, doesn't think you're going to come back from your injury, but don't worry, Purds, you know me. He said, I remember, I won't use the language he used, but you know me. He goes, I'm not a... So for me, you play. If you train like you're training, you'll play. And then you'll either get a move or you'll change the chairman's mind. Great. 2 days later, there's a bag of balls, Purge. You're training by yourself. You just totally dismissed me because the chairman had gone to him and said, well, you're not signing anyone until you got Purge's wage. So we had to just turn, but he turned like that on me. So I got back to Hereford and it was just, just felt home. I felt relaxed. I felt like I was back where I should be. Played in the trial game, didn't pull up any trees, but I was fit. And then went back to Oldham, on the Friday. And it was like, right, get my boots, everything else that I need, come back down. And we had Stockport away on the Saturday. I scored 2 in the first 10 minutes. Got cramp after 20 minutes. Honestly, I remember Bowser was on the bench and Bowser was laughing his head off at me. Because after about 25 minutes, got a goal kick and I was jogging back to the halfway line. I was like, oh, my right calf's gone away. Then my left calf started to go and I'm stretching and Pitts goes, you got cramp already? I'm like, yeah, mate, I'm struggling. 30 minutes. I think I lasted 55 minutes, something like that. And I think to score those 2 goals straight away, and obviously I knew Fleets, I knew Joe Colbeck because he'd come up to Darlington for a time. He was on loan to us from Bradford, I think it was. And there were a couple of other players. So it just felt so good to be back. Mm-hmm. And then I went back to Oldham in January because Oldham wanted me to come to Hereford, and Hereford were offering me a massively reduced contract from what I was on Oldham. And Oldham were like, well, we're not paying you the extra. So I said, well, I'll come back to Oldham then. And they were like, yeah, fine. And they tried to call my bluff, and I turned up, and Paul Dick was like, what are you doing here? You've gone to Hereford? I'm like, no, I'm not going. So then they paid me up, and then I could come here type thing, which is just politics of football, you know. I probably owed Oldham that little bit of money because I'd never made the first team, but at the same time they'd literally tossed me to one side and said I'll never play again. So I wanted to kind of like get them back and everything. And then so I finished the season here. We obviously stayed up, I think, about 2 games before the end of the season, but mathematically we were safe. Pitts was doing a good job. You know, we got a manager that wanted to do it right. He wanted Hereford to succeed, and then off the back of that, obviously himself succeed and stuff. One of the lads a little bit, probably too much at times. So sometimes he'd be one of the lads, then all of a sudden he's having a go at you, and you're like, you can't flip that quickly. You've got to be one or the other. But that first season was just kind of like, let's just stay up and reconvene and hopefully start maybe trimming this wage bill. Because I remember coming back, like I say, I think there was a couple of players on £1,500 a week, and they had their apartments paid for them, with bills paid for them and stuff as well. And I remember coming back and thinking, well, Graham, 3-4 years ago, has offered me, I think he offered me 875, same team, same league, same fan base. How are we paying people 1,500? Because I know that Tam was probably getting offered the most money on maybe just under £1,000, something like that. I remember thinking, this ain't gonna last. And then we signed Stefan Stam, £1,200-1,300 a week, free apartment, free bills. And we signed Delroy Facey. Story with Delroy Facey, so obviously Nicky Featherstone had come on loan, and Fed and Delroy had the same manager. Delroy had scored 5 goals, I think, that season. So the season I came back on loan, it's the end of the season now, he'd scored 5 goals, but I think 4 of them were against us. So he looked good against us. And apparently so Fed's agent was speaking to Pitts, I've got this player. Delroy Facey, I'll have him. Apparently it was like, right, okay, yeah, I'll have him. I've got £1,100 left in my budget, but he can have it all. Now, Delroy was scrambling for a club. He probably would have taken £600 or £700 a week. He was really struggling. I'll give him £11 a week. Well, it's a long way to come. I'll get him an apartment. I'll pay all his bills. So the money was just flying out. That was the start of it. You know, we talk about a gone bar and things like that. And, you know, Martin Foyle getting relegated, going to the Conference, but it started as soon as David Key came through the door and started offering those contracts out. It's too much money for this club. Can't afford it, can't sustain it. But yeah, so that second season, I mean, it started off, we went to Mercia on a pre-season trip, the worst trip ever. We went on this abandoned golf course where there was nothing there. We played Mercia. We had a left back, Joe, I can't remember his last name, Joe Heath.
Joe Heath, yeah.
And we were just a bunch of unruly kids, and Pitts couldn't control us. Like, Joe Heath was doing what he wanted, so Pitts had to pop it and said, Joe, do it. And Joe Heath turned around to Pitts and said, no, from now on. And, you know, saying this to a manager, Joe Heath turns around to Pitts, screams at him from on the pitch, no, from now on, you do what I say. Said that to Pitts. I was on the bench like, can't say that to a manager.
Jeez.
So Pitts, you know, tamping up and down the thing. And then he went to Joe and said, mate, you got to say sorry. And Joe said sorry. And then Pitts like, you said sorry. And I was thinking, mate, you can't let him get away with that. Then we went out in Mercia and everyone just started having a fight. We had, I think, Towner and I think it was Greeny were swinging at each other. Right. Joe Colbeck and Delroy. I think Harry Pell was in tears on the coach because people were hammering him. Towner, big glass door, was punching the glass door, trying to smash the glass door to get to Greeny. with James McQuilkin clinging on to him, trying to pull him back. Yeah, trying to pull him back. And then I'm like, Jesus Christ, this has gone wrong. And then I look up and there's Pitts and Holty and Richard Sneaks looking. So I go over to Pitts to try and say, mate, you know. And then Fez comes flying after me because Fed didn't get on with Pitts. He didn't like Pitts. But because I was talking to Pitts and he couldn't have a go at Pitts, he wanted to fight me. And Fed's the most docile, you know, calm person ever. So yeah, it didn't start well that season. And then that season, obviously, we had Sneaks and Holty, who kind of didn't really want to be here at times. Then we brought Gary Peters in.
When you say that, what do you mean by that? Like, what were they giving you?
Just after a game, whether we've won, lost or drawn, everyone was laughing and messing around.
Really?
Yeah, the dressing room, we had like Kenny Lunt. So we had really good players. Kenny Lunt was great. Nicky Featherstone. Johan Arquan is one of the most potentially good players I've ever played with. He was like a Nicholas Anelka. But his head wasn't there, do you know what I mean? He'd be out drinking, he'd come in, you could tell he'd been drinking the day before and stuff like that. It just did, nothing knitted. We had Nathan Elder, who was really good as a father figure, but he just almost like, well, what can I do with all of this? Because we had so many fights within the squad. And then that just made Jamie just start to lose his way a little bit. I think he looked at so many different ways and so many options to try and change things. He just became a bit of a mess.
Is that his inexperience as a manager stepping up from this?
I think it was his inexperience. I think he got lauded a little bit in the first season for keeping us up, and then the second season, like I said, then people start moaning, and then you close the doors and you go, I know what I'm doing. Because I used to be able to go to Pits and say, mate, this is, do this, do that, or I think this would help. And I remember him just turning around to me and telling me to go away. And I was like, right, okay, so now the barrier's been put up between even me and Pitts, and me and Pitts get on well. I think Pitts knows this as well. He knows he lost his way, and he's disappointed in himself that he let it snowball. Like, I remember we had Graham, who always used to do this thing, and it was really good. When we needed points, he'd come in, he'd have on the board, he'd have about 12 games on the board, and he'd split them into 4 groups of 3 games. And all he'd do is say, those 3 games we might have top of the table, bottom of the table and mid-table. But he'll always say, right, what I want to do is look at these, right, how many points can we get from those 3 games? And we'd say 7. So we try and just get 7 points from those 3 games, then 6 points from those 3 games. And then, okay, well, that's a real tough 3 games now. But if we can get 4 points, and it used to really work for us. So we come in and Pitts is doing it. And I thought, I sat down in front of it and I looked and said, this is a real good idea, this is Pitts. I looked and he had about 13 games, and the first game was Swindon. I think they were top of the league, Decanio, stuff like that. And I thought, perfect, this is Swindon at home. And he went, right, he said something like, we need 15 points to stay up this season. Let's look where we're going to get them from. This is a Friday, we've got Swindon tomorrow. Swindon tomorrow, for me, we'll lose that. And he put an L next to it. And I like sat back. And I was like, I literally went, whoa, Pitts. We can't go into a game tomorrow saying we're going to lose this game. He threw his pen on the floor, went, all right, then what do you want to do? Like that. So I was like, let's put it into 3. And then what we'll do is we can say, let's get this many points, like what Graham did. So he picks his pen back up. He goes, okay, I'll tell you what, let's look at the games we will win. He went down, we only won 2. He went down the list of 13 and we won 2 of them. So we had to go back to the top of the list and go, we could beat them, and it was just a mess, and that's where it had got to. Gary Peters and Pitts were butting heads. Really? Gary Peters was great when he came in. The first game was Swindon away for him, and I think we drew 3-3 or something. And what Gary said, he said, we don't want to overplay it. So I was playing fullback at the time, and he was like, so if the right mid isn't quite on, just put it in behind him, chase us. Okay, yeah. But then all of a sudden, so then that turned into, I'm not allowed to pass to my right mid anymore. What about no, don't pass centre mid. All right, okay. What about centre half? No, don't pass it back to him, because whatever he can do, you can do. What about front man's feet? No, he might lose it. Literally, it turned into, I had to put it in the channel. Even if I'm on the halfway line and they're on the 18-yard box, I've still got to try and chip it over them, because his philosophy was, we give it away to win it back in a better area. And that just blew my mind. Give it away. We give it away to win it back in a better area. If you're in trouble, flip one in the channel and let's just squeeze up. But it became, I remember training session, the left back, Joe Heath, passed it into Nicky Featherstone. He turned out and he pinged it to Tom Barkhausen on the right wing. Great ball. Stop. He went absolutely mental at Joe and Fed for making that pass. Fed for asking for it, Joe for giving it him, goes in the channel. It got stupid. So then it was Pitts or Gary Peters, and then we brought Rich O'Kelly in. And Rich was great, he just didn't have enough time, and I go back to myself. I'd had a season that season where we'd underperformed, but I'd still tried to keep my level, I'm going to do as well as I could. You know, we had Harry Pell, Will Evans, who weren't passers. We had a lot of frauds that season. I call them frauds, where you won't see them for 60 minutes, and then we're 3-0 down. Now they want the ball because you know there's no pressure now. They've all dropped off, and then you'll get booked in the last 5 minutes, and the fans will go away and go, well, at least he tried. It's like he's done nothing all game.
Yeah.
He's hid behind players, and then when I can't pass you the ball, and then I turn out, you throw your arms up in the air, and all the fans say, why didn't you pass it to him? He tears my head off.
Did it feel weird with Jamie Pitman still there with O'Kelly coming in as manager? Did it feel like he was undermined in a way? Do you know what I mean?
No, I think for me, Jamie and Rich would have been a really good partnership because Jamie would have been a really good assistant to Rich. That actually worked. Jamie as manager with Rich and with Holty and Schneeks, you know, we'd lose games with Holty and Schneeks, and then we'd come in and Holty would be nudging you saying, oh, look, my accumulator won. He, you know, that again, he doesn't care about the club. Gary Peters came in, I think, to oust Jamie and get the job. Whereas when Rich came in, I think Jamie welcomed Rich, you know, and they would have been a really good partnership. And then last 3 games of the season, Rich plays me behind the front man, you know, in that number 10 role again, because obviously he was manager in the Chester season. And we went to Crawley, beat him 3-0. And then last game of the season, obviously here, we beat Torquay 3-2. We go 3-0 up. I think I set up Dell's goal. I won the penalty for Pelly, and then I scored the third last ever league goal at the Blackfriars, then last ever league goal for Hereford United. So it just didn't click quick enough. And we went to Barnet, I think, with 4 games to go, and we drew to all. Was it 0-0? Was it? But Johan had a chance 6 yards out with about 10 minutes to go. I missed that game. I can't remember what it was. It was my hamstring or my calf, but I was tight. And Rich, I said to Rich, mate, I want to play. And Rich was like, I can't lose you for the next 3, because I think we had Northampton in that as well. So I'm not going to play you. And I remember watching it, and it was just hard work. And then Johan had that chance. And then obviously we come in 3-0 up against Torquay. And I think Barnet had just scored the penalty just before half-time, was it, against Burton? Or Burton had missed a penalty. That's it, Burton had missed a penalty just before half-time. And I remember us all going, oh. And then we came out, we didn't have the same energy. We managed to win the game 3-2. But that, like, half-time, Calvin Zola, I think it was, missed a penalty for Burton. And that,
over the bar.
Yeah. But then I look back, that season, the worst game of my career, Gillingham away. The worst game of my career. We score, I think Tom Barkhusen scored after about 4 minutes. I scored a penalty after about 10 minutes. I broke my nose after 12 minutes. I headed the back of someone's head, and I thought, oh, wow. And I went like that, there's no blood. And then my nose was about here. So I pushed my nose, I've got a big bump now. I pushed my nose back across, and then it was just, I had to put 2 buds up my nose for the whole game. We were 2-0 up, and Gillingham had gone at the time. They were gone. They were losing every home game, and the crowd were on them. And I remember after 30 minutes, Delroy was winning every flick on, and me and Joe Colbeck or Tom Barkhausen were getting onto him. We were absolutely battering him. Half an hour in, Jamie Pitman said, no one makes any more runs. We just sit back and try and see it through. It's like, it's 30 minutes, mate. And then they scored just before half-time, just after half-time. Then it was 3-2, 3-3, 4-3, 4-4, and then I had a penalty. And the keeper saved it. This must have been 91st minute. Saved it, I think went out for a corner, came in, we got a free kick, Ken Lunty at the wall, and they broke and scored. And I was the one chasing to try and get there, and I couldn't quite get there. So I remember going into the change room afterwards, and I just, oh God, I've never felt so low in my life. Like, I've got 2 blooded buds at my nose, broken nose. I've just missed a penalty that's, must have probably been about 10 games left, something like that, 8 games left. And I knew that is a massive turning point for us. If we'd have gone for it after 30, we wouldn't have 3 or 4-0. They'd absolutely gone. But that penalty miss, although we'd still got 8 games left or whatever, that penalty miss for me is that one thing where I think if that had gone in, I think we would have stayed up, because I think we would have kicked on for those last few games to get enough points. And that's the worst game of my career, that.
Yeah, I think it's maybe a bit harsh on yourself to sort of put that issues, you know, because at the end of the day, football cliches, but you know, it's a season, not just one game, and obviously, yes, okay, that is an example, but so is in that game, being a couple of goals up and
Yeah,
sitting back.
yeah.
But also you say about, Arkin's miss against Barnet, or, there were other lots of other games.
Calvin Zola's
We weren't-
penalty
well,
miss,
exactly. We
yeah.
weren't great that season anyway, really, overall. So
No, we were poor, and
it's-
we were disjointed, and again there was people coming to pick up some money and go and try and get home and stuff like that, which really showed, I think.
You were saying there are fights and stuff in the squad. Did Richard O'Kelly kind of stamp that out when he come in? How did he deal with that?
Rich was great. So before Rich came in, not long before actually, I think I was captain, and I went around the place. This is how bad it got, and I kind of look back and think, was it the right thing to do, or was it not? But I was getting egged on by Delroy and I can't remember. I think it might have been. I brought Greeny into it because Greeny, obviously, like me, what a player, what a lad, loves Hereford.
yeah.
And it was kind of at the point, Greeny said to me, I'm not playing for Gary Peters anymore. I'm not playing for him. That's how bad it had got. And there was other players as well. If Gary, because it was like, who's in charge? And it was almost like we had to decide whether we want Jamie in charge or Gary in charge. Greeny and a few others, I'm not playing for Gary ever again. So I almost went round the players and did a tally. Who do you want to be manager? Who do you want to be manager? And we had people like Sam Clucas who had come in, who Gary had brought in. So it wasn't too far off. So then I stood up. I got all the players in the boardroom. I stood up and said, "Look, this is what I've gone." Everyone knew what we were doing. Delroy said to me, "Mate, you go and say it because they'll take it from you." Delroy was in the back of the room, and so I'm there to say, "Look, this is what we're going to do. We're going to go to Pitts. We're going to say, Pitts, we want you to be in charge. We want to do it your way." Blah, 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 blah. That's the general consensus. I know people are disappointed, but we've got to go with one. And this is the majority vote almost. And then I was like, everyone okay with that? And I was like, yeah, no one's excited, but everyone's like, yeah, okay. And then it turns out, someone said to me they were sat next to Del, and Del's got up at the end, everyone's got up and walked out, but when Del got up, said, yeah, it's all right talking, Purds, almost threw me under the bus. And it was like, you're the one who's come to me to say we need to do this, but didn't have the balls to do it yourself. And now you're then, and that's, we call it acid in the changing rooms, and it spreads. As soon as one or two people start talking bad about other people, it spreads. You see it in Big Brother and Love Island and stuff like that. You get your little groups and stuff. But then I went to Pitts and said, mate, we want to do it your way. Pitts like, great.